Hey everyone, you have to respect some people's sport, where to you, it looks so asinine and so absurd that you can never imagine yourself doing it, but to these people, it's everything to them. Like, it really matters what background you come from and whether or not it will appeal to you. Let's start with fighting sports. If you come from Europe or America, that would be boxing or kickboxing. In Asia, that'd be karate or taekwondo. In South America, I'd say BJJ maybe. But if I had to say where medieval MMA comes from, I just say like tiny small towns full of drunk people in like America or Europe where they're just so bored they have nothing else to do. Let me start by saying that for quite a while I already knew about this, about medieval MMA, but it's only a few days ago that I've seen it much more frequently and seeing other people say like how badass it looks. I know by the name it sounds really lame, like the kind of thing that would be pitched for a kid's birthday party where no one would show up because it sounds gay, but there are clips you can find where it has like short segments where it actually looks interesting, not just because the guys, clobbering each other, but because of the production value, like the lighting, the arena, the cage, the camera. If this was a sport that nobody cared about, with a total of 10 people that actually invested in it, then it would look nothing like this. It would look like much more akin to like a grainy cell phone video from like 10 years ago. No, look at this. They have a cage, they have an octagon cage. There's like an actual arena, like a fighting hall that you rent out and use for the night. I mean, just zoom in on the logo on the canvas, because then you see that this was an event by MMA, literally translating to Armored MMA. Honestly, I can't give shit against that. It is a pretty good name. I mean, what explanation do you need? It's MMA with armor on. Okay, now let's actually look at the fight, because despite having the tagline of MMA, it is quite removed from actual MMA, because they're using weapons like swords, shields, maces, which makes sense. If they're already in the full getup, they can't really throw, like windmill kicks. But I just think they added that MMA part in to make it sound way more appealing. Odds are, if you already like fighting events, you'll probably be more allured to medieval fighting. Especially if they like seeing guys go berserk, just wail on each other. Because to be 100% honest, despite having like Renaissance weapons and like they look very nice, within seconds, they closed that distance they had like at the beginning of the round, and they evolved just punching each other with the shields or just the gauntlets they have, with nothing like no protection, just the armor and chainmail just protecting their own knuckles. I mean, it makes sense. Every single sharp weapon they have is dulled to the point that they become like butter knives, so they actually cut each other. That makes sense. But that does mean that they can't do anything like thrusting, so because it's useless. So they become very limited. Another thing I wanted to mention that like crossed my mind was how this sort of genre is getting more popular because it has worked over the years in connection with similar like medieval themed shows like Fortune Fire. That show where they get a bunch of 50-year-old guys from the middle of swamps to make their favorite historical weapons. So I could definitely imagine that the kind of guy that would like binge an entire season of this show would go get a beer and then sit back on the couch to change the channel and see the new fight card for medieval MMA. If you like love history and weapons and violence, then yeah, this would be like a huge buffet for you of your favorite stuff that you can't find anywhere else. Yeah, maybe sure, you like watching the NFL or the UFC, but sometimes you just want to lay back on your couch with your fat beer belly and see these guys fill up the armor with sweat. Okay, to medieval MMA's respect, I think it's probably like one of the safest sports you could do, maybe, because the most I could imagine seeing on these guys' faces after you take off the helmet after a fight would be like a couple of bruises, like on the forehead maybe. But compare that to the brain damage football players or UFC fighters get when you subject them to the violent whiplash of someone else like knocking into them, or getting like a very powerful roundhouse kick straight to the side of the head with nothing coming in between, like a helmet. This is one of the reasons why I can respect medieval MMA more than like other sports. Let's say bare knuckle boxing in Russia, where they have no protection, as violent as possible, and like there's nothing on the floor. So if someone like falls back or gets knocked out and they land on the back of their heads, then yeah, that's just extremely fucked. So I feel like this is like a good, dumb entertainment than most other amateur, non-big stuff, and at least the fighters, they're not coming out of it with really bad injuries. Despite that, I feel like medieval MMA is going to be reserved to being a very niche sport that you rarely see in like mainstream media. With one big factor for that being just how absurd they look, not just with how they're chasing each other, but also because of the armor they're wearing, which although is accurate, I'm very sure, you can't deny that it looks somewhat clunky and goofy and dumb. The closest this sport has ever been to being acknowledged by a big figure was Joe Rogan, who just made fun of it on Twitter. And yeah, that was probably like a litmus test where to some people, this whole thing looks gay, because to them, they're just hiding in armor, not actually, being out there and getting hurt. Regardless of that, it would be a lie to say that there isn't like an audience for this, because then you have more dedicated people set up stuff like this on a much bigger scale, where you have like two sides of 50 guys actually making historical battles, fighting each other in like one huge crowd. Therefore, stuff, events and videos like this wouldn't be out there if there wasn't, an actual audience that would care to watch it. That although it isn't big enough to make it the next UFC, it's at least alive enough to make it like a very niche sport that you can watch with your friends and laugh at because it looks funny.